Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
I don't feel like I'm really making things better.
Listen, Nikki, it's a war, right? Now, you can't change a thing unless you win the war. And you cannot win the war unless you're prepared to fight.
Good. Okay, so it's Manning. What do we do? I mean, do we go after him with one of your, things that you say, like a big bum dildo of vengeance or something?
There you go, that's my girl, yeah. Indiana Murray and the bum dildo of vengeance. I like you.
Welcome to Quiet Riot, the politics podcast that cuts through the screaming headlines to give you the real story. I'm Andreou.
And I'm Naomi Smith. Our goal is to enlighten, not frighten. All charm, no harm.
So unpack your suitcase, stick the washing on, and settle down to help us begin another Quiet Riot.
Quiet Riot.
Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot. I'm Alex.
And I'm Naomi.
And I'm producer Kenny, back in the studio with this pair because I broke my curfew again.
This week, as politicians return for the new parliamentary session, Labour seem to be testing new strategies for taking the fight to their opponents. And one of them seems to be a willingness to talk about the costs of Brexit and a speeding up of their policy to forge a closer relationship to the EU.
And we'll also be looking at wealth inequality, with housing, education and opportunity increasingly dependent on whether you've got a bank of mum and dad. Should government step in to help level the playing field? A new proposal from a Labour backbencher suggests just that.
And to help us unpack all of this, we're joined today by Chair of the UK Trade and Business Commission, defender of Welwyn Hatfield and Labour MP, it's Andrew Lewin.
Thank you very much for having me.
Welcome, Andrew.
Andrew, you're a keen cricketer, I understand. Are you more of a bowler, batsman, or a bit of an all-rounder?
I am. I'd like to pretend that I'm an all-rounder, but these days I'm a batsman in the Alistair Cook mould more than the Ben Stokes mould.
Right.
But yes, it's been a good cricketing summer. Great test series between us and India. And we've got the Women's T20 World Cup to look forward to next summer as well. And the Ashes, of course, this winter. So I'm a happy cricketer.
In Parliament, would you rather face a fast bowler or a googly? Now, googly, for anyone baffled, is a deceptive shot that looks like it's heading one way and ends up going behind you. Uh-huh. It's also known as a wrong-un.
Plenty of those.
So I guess the question is the head-on, direct, lethal attack more dangerous than the trap left behind?
I love the question. I think I would always prefer to take on a fast bowler. Let's go on instinct.
Head to
head.
Right.
Fair contest.
Yeah.
So you don't trust the sneaky ones that leave little traps.
No, absolutely not. And there might be some of them in the Commons on the other benches. Of course.
Have you taken anything from cricket into politics? Genuinely, strategically, if you watch a lot of, do you play as well?
No, it's a good question.
Village cricket.
And actually, I've always played. I play a little bit less, of course. Now I've got the privilege to do this job, but I do play for the Lords and Commons cricket team, and we have 4 or 5 games a year.
What's your best score?
My career best score.
Yeah.
I've got a few hundreds. 116 is my career best score.
You've done a century. That's very good.
There's a serious point in that the Lords of Commons is cross-party, and this is true for lots of things that happen behind the scenes. And actually, the welcome I've got from lots of the Conservative MPs, has been some of the warmest that I had.
Finally, a Labour guy who can play cricket.
Exactly.
We can call ourselves cross-party now.
Absolutely. I seem to be in demand. I seem to be popular with them. But no, it's been really nice. And I do say to people sometimes that what goes on in the House of Commons, some of what you see in the chamber is actually panto. And behind the scenes, there are actually some very good relationships that exist between MPs of different parties.
I have to say, it's nice to know, I guess, that behind the scenes, you're not all monsters.
Quiet Riot.
For the last month or so, Westminster has looked like the opening of 28 Days Later, menacing, ghostly, deserted streets, with Farage the only figure marauding them as if infected by the rage virus. Graffiti in the background that reads, Reform UK is extremely fucking near. As it begins to become repopulated in anticipation of Parliament's return next week, Labour appear to be finally trialling some proper attack lines on all the nativist bullshit that has been trying to stir disorder for the last few weeks. Have a listen to Minister Nick Thomas-Symonds' speech on the supercharging of the UK-EU reset on Wednesday.
Now, we know we are going to have a political fight on this, but the Prime Minister was very direct in his instructions to me on taking office. National interest first. Build on what's best about Britain. That cannot rest on easy answers and snake oil. The Tories completely 2D, stuck with the ghost of Brexit past, and then Nigel Farage, who has pledged to reverse our progress. His manifesto at the next election will say in writing that he wants to take Britain backwards, cutting at least £9 billion from the economy, bringing with it a risk to jobs and a risk of food prices going up. He won't tell you that directly, and I doubt you'll see it on the side of a red bus. But it would be a sledgehammer to businesses and people doing the weekly shop. And that is purposeful. Because aside from, frankly, his pension packet, Nigel Farage can't bring himself to have any relationship with the EU. Nigel Farage wants Britain to fail. His model of politics depends on it.
The speech was accompanied by a few new polls that show a nascent resurgence of pro-European sentiment and seems to signal a pivot to a faster, more aggressive UK-EU reset and a willingness to talk about Brexit and to pin it on those responsible, an element which for many of us has been all too notable in its absence. Naomi, what does the new polling show?
So this was YouGov polling for ABTA, which is the travel trade body, in conjunction with Seasonal Business in Travel. What has changed is the number of people that support youth experience, youth mobility scheme, it was previously known as. That's gone right up to 76% of voters supporting a deal with the EU on that, from the high 60s. So that has only continued to go up.
I don't think I can remember the last time that 76% of voters supported anything.
Any one thing, indeed. And that goes across all voter types and people that voted Leave, even 61% of them from 2016 backing it. We knew that, and Better Britain had done an MRP of it, showing every constituency in the country was fine with it, etc. And then they have asked about the closer relationship. You know, do you want a closer or more distant relationship? That is about 66%, I think, in this survey. That's down a little bit, I think, from where it had been when we polled that back in May. But it hasn't been in the news in the way it had been in May in the run-up to that big summit with von der Leyen and Starmer. It's all in the right place. It is a very helpful poll to have at the end of the summer as people are coming back and beginning now to think about what this parliamentary term needs to focus on, particularly given that over the course of the next 18 months, we are going to have another summit. We don't know when, but it will happen in 2026. And we will, of course, be coming up against several other deadlines. You've got things like the review of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the Brexit deal. Now, those of us that are old enough to remember Johnson signing that back in 2020, it baked in a 5-year review. That means that deadline comes up next year too. And then you've got other things that are expiring, like issues around the UK energy, cross-border adjustment mechanisms, things like that have deadlines actually at the beginning of next year. So plenty of good fodder in the poll to give courage to government to continue to deliver all of the good stuff that they negotiated back in May.
Yeah, and I think when kids go back to school is also a period when parents are thinking of the future down the line, you know, especially if there's a transition from primary to secondary or...
And straight after A-level results, you know, how many young people will be thinking, oh, I'd love to go and, you know, study abroad, work abroad for a while, etc. Oh, look, I can only go for 90 days.
So it's kind of bright in people's mind, I think. Not to spoil the party, but Europe, like the rest of the world, has bigger headaches to deal with, frankly, than long Brexit, which has similarities to long COVID, but is entirely self-inflicted. So is a business sector by business sector the most realistic way to reset things? Or do we need actually a more aggressive head-on political approach?
It's such a good question. And I think the technocratic, let's do this first, see if that works, then consider extending it to other industry sectors, sounds sensible. But I don't think we are in sensible times. And I think when you are staring down the barrel of poll leads for reform and far-right parties across Europe, we are running out of time to have those sensible people who are at the negotiating table right now, both in Brussels and here in the UK, and then, of course, the people that represent the member states themselves, are all butting up against the rise of far right. And I think Europe need to get on with it. And I think they need to expedite a lot of this more quickly. I don't agree.
So you need to grab the low-hanging wins.
I think so
right
because,
now,
and look, the EU can move at pace when it wants to. It often gets earmarked as a cumbersome block that takes its time to negotiate. Well, look, when they had the threat of Trump imposing tariffs on them this summer, my goodness, they moved quickly to try and negotiate a deal there. We've seen it before with things like Ukraine, pandemic. They can move quickly when they want to. And I think they need to understand that the current situation is almost as much of an existential emergency to the future of the European project as anything else. And what they need to be doing is understanding that they have got a very willing negotiating partner in charge in the UK right now. And they need to lock in some of that stuff ahead of the next UK general election, which is still 4 years away. A lot can change, caveat, caveat, caveat. But one thing we know about Farage is that he will not want to undo something that would make him unpopular. And undoing an SPS agreement, an agri-food deal that could help ease pressure on consumers when they get to the till with the weekly shop, if that would put prices up, he wouldn't row back on it. If it hadn't yet been negotiated, if the ink hadn't dried, he wouldn't think twice about tearing it up. So I think people in Brussels and member states individually need to act more quickly than the current timeline is showing at the moment. And not just on the agri-food deal. I think they need to be parallel processing because that's where the growth comes, and the protection and the shielding from all of the God knows what it'll be tomorrow impact of Trump changing his mind all the time for both economies and consumers in both economies.
Did any of you see Mario Draghi's speech a couple of days ago? I mean, I have the advantage of being able to watch it in Italian, and I don't know if it's been translated, but it will be in books in 10 years' time, and I'm thinking of doing a translation for listeners and releasing it as a special episode. And it's exactly what you're saying, Naomi. He's telling the European Union bigwigs, basically, this slowly approach doesn't work anymore. The challenges we face are existential, and everything we have built at European Union level has always been because it was a smart response to what was going on. And
or
right now, we're not
progression.
responding to what's going on, and what's going on demands a response. So have a listen to Nick Thomas-Symonds.
The current situation is still nowhere near good enough. And look, I understand why people voted for Brexit. They wanted change and they wanted control. But nobody voted for the kind of change that I've been talking about. The barriers to trade and the ever-expanding web of bureaucracy, hiking prices and killing jobs. And where we wanted control, like on immigration, we got dysfunction and chaos. The internal psychodrama of the Conservative Party made its leaders scared of fixing the consequences. At too many crossroads, they ducked the hard choices and took the path of least resistance. And here's the thing. Britain still had choices after Brexit. And thankfully, Britain still has choices now.
Andrew, you are chair of the UK Trade and Business Commission, a cross-party, cross-industry, sounds like a cricket team, expert group that scrutinises the research. So, like Naomi, you look at this stuff quite closely. Is Farage out of step with the country now when it comes to Brexit? Is his obsession something that is still shared?
I think you're right that he's out of step. And I think obsession is an interesting word because I think for the vast majority of people, as you see in the polling, their position is, I want a practical improvement in the relationship with the European Union. If you run a small business, you've been disproportionately hit by bureaucracy and paperwork. You're seeing the impact. You're seeing the cost. These are people who might have been Remainers and in some cases might have been Leavers, but have seen the damage that Brexit has caused. And that is why you keep seeing polling results which say 2/3 of people want a stronger relationship, as Naomi was saying. your word about Farage and his obsession puts him in a minority because he's very ideological about this. And both Farage and Kemi Badenoch came to the House of Commons in the week that the big UK-EU summit took place and said, we're going to rip up this deal before we've even seen it, which is an extraordinary position to take as the leader of the opposition and the wannabe leader of the opposition. And that is well out of line with mainstream thinking on the EU. So I do think we have an opportunity to be braver and to make the case. And I wouldn't underestimate, by the way, I agree with much of what Naomi said, but we have made significant progress in our first year in office. It was only...
The sort of industry by industry.
I think so. And just brief reflection on the question of a youth mobility scheme, now called a youth experience scheme. It's only about 4 or so months ago that I worked with 61 other Labour MPs to write publicly to Nick Thomas-Symonds to say, we want to embrace this. We think this is a progressive policy that commands support. And at that point, it was in some doubt as to whether the government was going to commit to this or not. It wasn't a manifesto pledge. I was optimistic. My view of it is that the door was ajar and we helped push it open. That's now formally being negotiated and is a really important step forward.
And today, in the Q&A portion of the speech that Nick Thomas-Symonds made at The Spectator that was chaired by Gove, when he got onto the issue...
It was quite awkward.
It was pretty convivial, actually.
Yeah,
I think they admire one another's intellect.
No,
and they both
I know, but there
people.
was also a sense of, you did this.
There was a few kind of barbed... As Michael full well knows, because his government negotiated it.
But I got the sense, sorry to interject, but I got the sense that Gove kind of regrets Brexit now. There was something in his body language that was quite contrite.
He certainly has come to the table on alignment. And I think has a concession around ECJ oversight. I mean, look, the Sunak government that delivered the Windsor Framework accepted that ECJ would have to have oversight. You know, they've already conceded on that point. But when Nick got on to talking about youth mobility, he said, let me be clear that this is an excellent opportunity for young British people, and it will be the duty of MPs of all parties to sell benefits of it to the young people in their constituencies. And that was a real tone change. He did say it would be capped. He did say it would be smart. It'd be time limited. Obviously, they're in live negotiation at the moment, so we have no detail on it. But there was a tone change. And I think the courage that government will have had from lots of its backbenchers that signed Andrew's letter will have helped no end.
And this is a slightly different question. Is relitigating a little bit parts of Brexit, I guess, or reviewing what happened in that time? Is it a vote winner or is it a vote loser? What I mean by that is it time to pin the tail on the donkey, to say, because part of the frustration with watching this stuff from Nigel Farage is that, you know, he sold the pink potion last year and he's rolled back into town with a green one. And no one is saying, excuse me, mate, but the last thing you sold this country was a fucking disaster. How dare you?
Well, I think quite right, listeners might well be saying that, but that it has been a disaster. And I think we have to, as politicians, find the right balance. You know, I self-describe as a pro-European. From the backbenches in Parliament, I'm going to seek to push the government as far as I can to make progress. And I think we can make really significant progress in the relationship over the course of this Parliament. And I'm optimistic about where we've got to, but ambitious for what happens next. I don't think it's the time to reopen the whole question. For one reason above all others, it will consume our politics. And we also were elected as a government to rescue public services that are in an emergency status, to improve and help people on the cost of living, particularly those who need that support most. And if we were to reopen the Pandora's box in this Parliament of the question of membership, it would dominate everything else. But that doesn't mean, in my view, that we can't make real material progress that can make a difference to people's lives.
Can I ask you one other thing on this topic? The question around whether or not revisiting Brexit properly and grasping the nettle as a vote winner or loser is asked often. But the truth is, of course, that it's a media loser in this country, isn't it? Do you think that in Westminster that's more important than whether it's actually a vote winner or a vote loser?
It's a good question. I think, as I said a moment ago, why it would be impossible, in my view, to do in this Parliament is because everything else would be drowned out by the question. There's also the really material point, and Naomi was talking earlier about where are the EU on. In the EU, we want to move faster on this, not just our government. The EU 27 are not ready, in my view, for a conversation about the UK rejoining.
Quite rightly.
For very understandable reasons. So
Yeah.
I totally hear that there are going to be people listening to this podcast who are desperate to rejoin the European Union at some point in the future. My view as a backbench Labour MP and a pro-European is this Parliament is a time to rebuild bridges, to make a step change from where we were, but not
Trust exercises.
Well, I think so. And I think that matters. And it matters to leaders in the EU just as it does in our domestic politics here.
Is this approach enough of a strategy for turning around public sentiment? This idea that if you focus on results and people see the results, they will eventually come round? Or does it need to be more direct? If you were running the section that decides the media approach,
Sure.
would you be advising for a more confrontational, if you want, approach or not?
I sincerely believe it has to be both. And we've been talking about Nick's speech today, and I think that's a really important starting point. He's had the courage to directly go after Farage and what his policies would mean for people in terms of ripping up this agreement and the progress we've made with the EU. So that has to be part of it. And I think as we get through this Parliament, you will see more of that, sort of arguments from first principles. At the same time, delivery matters. And we've been talking about SPS deals, and, the vast majority of the public have no idea what an SPS deal means. But practically, what it means is that we should be in a position, once that is signed, that we see a pretty noticeable drop in prices in supermarkets, because there will be an end to checks that are really burdensome and increase pressure on business. It's going to help small businesses who have been hit disproportionately hard. And if people are starting to see that reality in 2 or 3 years' time, I do think that matters as well. So it's got to be a combination. I don't think you can just do one and rely on.
Yeah, man, give me back that mortadella with a little pistachio. I haven't had it in 2 years. I'd have to remortgage my fucking flat to get some.
If you've shopped online, chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout? The one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo.
Naomi, as a non-party affiliated person, do you think it should be a bit punchier?
I think in general it needs to be punchier, not just when it comes to talking about Europe. I'm concerned that the government has had yet another summer where there's been a bit of a vacuum that other people have filled. So last summer, we talked at length about why on earth did you do the winter fuel announcement now and let that dominate for 4 weeks in the run-up to Parliament coming back, and then, of course, the autumn statement. And again, we've seen a few things being trailed around property taxes and things like that. This is a government that could be controlling the airwaves if it wanted to.
As every
or if it
government
was
can,
able
actually.
to. I mean, I'm sure it probably does want to, but at the moment doesn't seem capable of it. And yet you've got Farage doing daily press conferences now, getting all the coverage. And when you've got 400 MPs and an absolutely unprecedented parliamentary majority in living memory, that is now a year in beginning to feel unforgivable. So I think that whatever the approach, it needs to change. When it comes to Europe very specifically, I do think that they can be much more bullish about saying there were no small boat crossings when we were in the EU. But they're frightened of saying that kind of stuff. And the polling shows and the focus group show they shouldn't need to be, that there are plenty of messages that do cut through well with different segments across the country, including those that are currently considering voting for Farage at the next election. So I'm sort of more generally frustrated with the lack of bullishness on comms than I am with it specifically on the issue of Europe. And I completely agree with Andrew that the last thing any of us needs or wants is an entire parliamentary term focused on one question yet again at this stage.
Not to overload the programme with cricketing references, but lack of confidence at the crease can be quite lethal, right? If you muck up your first ball and you almost get knocked out, it can force you into a bit of a paralysis.
Well, I'll say I'm a year into being MP. I feel like I've got my eye in now.
Yeah.
Very good. I'm not out for a duck anymore.
Quiet, right.
Some opposition parties are trying to open up a new front in this, a replay of their greatest Brexit hits in a way, by advocating we should leave the European Convention on Human Rights. Farage said so in his recent mad deport everyone speech. And all the signals from Badenoch are that she will make a similar announcement at Tory party conference. What signal does this send to our European neighbours? Is it problematic, actually, for what we're trying to rebuild in terms of relationship, for them to think in 3 years, number 10 will just unravel it all?
Well, the UK isn't alone in having challenges from the right.
That's
in politics.
true. There will be some sympathy.
Yeah, there will be. And they're actually more acute in some countries, actually, than we have here. The AfD came second in the German election not so long ago. As we're recording this, the prospect of the French government collapsing looks like a real one. So I think that's an important starting point, is that Europe has its own challenges with this. In terms of the ECHR, the Prime Minister couldn't have been more clear in terms of his commitment to it. Do you know what I found the most troubling about the Farage speech was two things? The concept that he wants to do a deal with the Taliban. The Telegraph this morning, Taliban says yes to deal with Farage. I mean, we laugh because you have to laugh, because otherwise you'd be crying.
It was like a Daily Beast headline. It was like a poke headline, like a satirical story.
And you laugh or you cry, because actually, if you think about it, what was the first thing that the Taliban did when they reassumed power was to say to all girls aged 11 and over, you are no longer allowed to have an education.
Yeah.
The idea that you're going to do a deal to send people, quite possibly people who served or supported British military forces 10, 15 years ago, seeking asylum here, would potentially, as I understand from what Farage said, be sent back to the welcoming arms of the Taliban. Absolutely extraordinary. And that needs to be taken on. And the second was that there was talk in his speech of a kind of ICE-style project in the UK, where they're going to be, seeking out people in their communities. And we've all seen those images in America of people with their faces covered, being bundled.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if it was put to Farage and Reform, is this what your plan is, they would deny it. But even the Republicans didn't say before they were elected, well, this is our plan. We're going to have people walking around with masked faces and putting people into cars. So we have to take this seriously and take it on.
And it's the kind of the consequences of saying these things and having not thought through what those are. The Good Friday Agreement, the Brexit deal itself, Trade and Cooperation Agreement, they are all baked in a commitment to the ECHR. It is referenced throughout them. But we have had on Labour's own side, people like Jack Straw and David Blunkett appearing to agree with an element. And of course, this is a Reform attack line now. Well, even your own people are saying that we should reconsider our relationship to the ECHR and our interpretation of it and blah, 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 blah. So does that weaken criticism the Labour government does find?
I don't think so, because there's a really important difference between saying there are elements of the ECHR which might need to be reformed with time. The law evolves. That has always been the case. And it's perfectly reasonable to say we're going to look at particular articles and have a mature debate about what the implications of those are. That's the position of the government, particularly in respect to Article 8. And I think that's a sensible place to be in. And I think there is a danger for people on the centre and the centre of left to get into a position where we say it's the ECHR unamended or nothing. But at the same time, we have to talk about the fundamental importance of human rights that we have enjoyed in Western democracies ever since the end of the Second World War. And, I don't tire of saying who was the biggest advocate for this, Winston Churchill. This is not some left-wing project. It had universal support among the political mainstream and is just as important today, those core principles, as they ever have been.
And maybe that is one of the areas where, going back to what I was saying before, it's okay to relitigate a little bit what happened during Brexit, because, for instance, the consequences for Northern Ireland were not thought through, despite people saying, you haven't thought this through, and everyone went, it'll be all right. So to replay that, and for it to be seen as taboo, to say, don't I know you from somewhere? Didn't you tell us that Brexit was going to be a cakewalk for Northern Ireland as well? I'm sure I've seen you before. I think that's okay. I wanted to say a couple of words on the David Blunkett, Jack Straw stuff, because I think there's been a lot of misreporting. So despite the splashes on the headlines, David Blunkett did not even suggest what the Telegraph attributed to him in the headline, to suspend the ECHR. He suggested a temporary suspension of one aspect in order to clear the backlog, citing wrongly, as it happens, Germany having done something similar. There is precedent, but it's not from Germany. He's got that wrong. I don't agree with that approach for what it's worth. I think bits of human rights being suspendable for one minority in whatever a state deems to be an emergency opens a very MAGA kind of worms, actually, because a lot of the executive White House power grab going on over there at the moment is under the guise of national emergency legislation. Jack Straw, on the other hand, talked about decoupling UK law from the Convention by making it explicit or adding an amendment, something to the Human Rights Act 1998, that national courts have to take account of ECHR decisions in this area, take account of, which is the language in the Act, that it was never intended to mean follow in all respects. And I think as one of the key people who drafted that bill, Jack Straw's suggestion is worth considering and discussing, actually, rather than being jumped on from left and right to say, gosh, aren't Labour awful? Because there is a genuine cultural clash there. The ECHR doesn't follow its precedent. ECHR precedent is only instructive to the ECHR, same with the ECJ. They don't have the same system as here, where precedent is king. Courts have taken this and applied the British law sensibility of ratio is sacred, and they have gotten into a pickle of creating then precedent for themselves, which under our legal system is then sacrosanct. So they just go back to their previous decision on this and say, well, we've already decided this. And each time it goes a little bit further. And I think Straw is right. It has fossilized, ossified into something quite peculiar that wasn't meant
Well, as
to
I
be
understand
there.
it, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, is getting legal counsel on whether the interpretation at the moment is as the original drafters intended it to be. So maybe they're already following Jack Straw's missive.
I wanted to close this by talking to both of you about the media's treatment of these issues a little bit, because I know what you're saying, Naomi, that there was a gap and it was filled. I think that's a slight breach of convention, to be honest. I think there was a soft convention that everyone needed a break. Everyone needed a break. And what Farage has done cleverly or dishonestly, depending on your view,
opportunistically and sensationally,
he took all his fucking holidays during parliamentary sitting time, first through the E-gates in France, and then came back all refreshed and tanned, trying to cause civil disorder. So I'm not going to give it credit, but I was struck on Wednesday that, having given us hours and hours of uninterrupted Farage during August, Sky News cut away from Nick Thomas-Symonds' speech after about 3 minutes to complain that basically it was not sexy enough.
Now, of course, resetting Britain's relationship with the EU will take time, and it does involve trade-offs. And it is time for a proper conversation. Kemi Badenoch rushed to say she'd reverse our deal before she'd even seen it. Nigel Farage, never won
Nick Thomas-Symonds there in Westminster talking about the UK's relationship with the European Union. Let's bring in our political correspondent, Mari Aurora. Mari, brutal honesty, it's a little dry, isn't it? Why should our viewers be worried about what Nick Thomas-Symonds is talking about today?
So a lot of the vocab is potentially quite dry. He's not necessarily the most exciting politician to watch. And Labour have been perhaps somewhat on the back foot. And this is Nick Thomas-Symonds and the Labour Party for a moment trying to find a way to persuade the British public that actually what Nigel Farage might say, it might sound simple and it might sound appealing, but actually some of the detail is actually more important. And the detail is what separates them from what they believe to be Nigel Farage's fantasy policies and unworkable, unrealistic policies. And so what they're arguing is, yes, it might not be quite as catchy. Yes, it might not be quite as sexy, politically speaking, but actually the substance is what matters, and the substance is what makes difference to people's lives and living standards.
And Mari, whilst you say that the Labour Party's not really got that kind of sexier, catchy politics at the moment, it's maybe a bit more of a technocratic government, maybe. They could kind of do with a little bit of a catchy headline or two, because all of the things we've just discussed and heard, they're suffering in the polls pretty substantially again.
they came off the exact bit where he was saying populism is offering easy solutions with no detail, to say it's a bit too much detail in that, isn't there? It seems to me that the idea of balance, especially a balance that takes account of parties' Westminster representation. I mean, Lib Dems can't get coverage for policy announcement for love nor money. It's sort of collapsed. Farage brings clicks, therefore his every utterance is televised live. Is this something I'm overly sensitized to, or is it a problem? And if it is a problem, what can be done?
I'd say a couple of things. First of all, I know we haven't talked about the hotel protests, but there was a brilliant tweet from Sundar Kotwala just this last weekend where it was billed that this was going to be the big weekend of national protest. And we have had mainstream media talking about civil disorder. And Sundar follows this very closely, and he says his best estimate is that, I believe it was on the Saturday, there were 5,000 protesters. Around about 3,000 of those were sort of people objecting to asylum hotels, and 2,000 or so were counter-protesters. And his tweet simply said this: 3,000 protesters, 2,000 counter-protesters, 210,000 people have just completed Parkrun. And it struck a chord with me because, of course, these issues matter and we can't deny that. And we're having an important discussion about them, but we have to have perspective about what's really going on in the country. And I think that's really important in the media, but also that politicians like me understand that and we don't all get caught up in the sense of this is everywhere.
Yeah. Weird report on Tuesday morning that began with, after another weekend of riots. And it's like, what?
Exactly. The second point is, look, I may be a newish MP, but my strong view is it's not for us as MPs to complain about what the media cover. We have to do better at getting their attention. And also, we're in an age where we have access to so many more channels than we used to. If I was sitting here 20 years ago, success or failure might be determined by, oh, have I got a chance to be interviewed in The Guardian all the time? Now, I can go on YouTube Shorts and do a post, as I did last week, about the fact that hundreds of thousands of parents are just going to get a big cut in their childcare costs because of Labour policy.
We'll drop a link to Andrew's YouTube Shorts.
I'm very impressed with myself because it's all new to me. It sounds, but there's a serious point here that as backbenchers, we have agency, and so does the government as well.
Andrew,
so it's on
I think
us.
you're in denial, mate, to be honest. Here are two people in this industry telling you that we prefer the sugar rush of nonsense to the actual detail and truth of policy. They don't find it sexy enough for you to be telling them that actually immigration numbers are going down. It's not sexy.
It is an issue. It is
so
an
can you
issue
be more sexy?
I'll do my very best for it. It's not televised.
What's the call to action this week?
Listeners, why not sign up as a monthly supporter to Best for Britain, Naomi's crew, and they will even plant a tree in their pro-EU forest for you. Because by the time the saplings you're planting have grown into forests, Britain will, we are certain, have returned to being an outward-looking, compassionate country that cares for the planet and for all its people. Please do that.
And there will be a link in the show notes to our Forest Donate page.
Quiet Riot. Hey, Fidelity. What's it cost to invest with the Fidelity app?
Start with as little as $1 with no account fees or trade commissions on U.S. stocks and ETFs.
That's music to my ears.
I can only talk.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Zero account fees apply to retail brokerage accounts only. Sell order assessment fee not included. A limited number of ETFs are subject to a transaction-based service fee of $100. See full list at fidelity.com/commissions. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
Right, Alex, it's that time again when you roll out your ethical yoga mat to tell us who has been peak performative pearl clutcher of the week. It's time, of course, for Wokey Dokey.
Wokey Dokey.
Alex, who's been polishing their halo just a little bit too hard this week?
So, King and Conqueror, new series
on
BBC. I think it's BBC and CBS.
Oh, has it got that hot guy Norton thingy Norton?
Yeah, it does. And the other hot guy from Game of Thrones. Anyway, this is beside the point. So there's the usual boring debate about casting any black person in historical action, basically, despite the show being created by the same guy who wrote the Guy Ritchie Sherlock Holmes film and Pompeii. You know, basically his speciality is ahistorical action. But that aside, I mean, I wouldn't give this bollocks the time of day. You know, this is a group of people willing to suspend their disbelief when it comes to dragons and ice zombies.
But not.
But black people are a stretch, apparently. But there were 3 social media posts that made me howl.
Go on.
So one of them asked Grok, "Hey Grok, were there any black people in England in 1066? And Grok replied, "Historical evidence shows people of African descent, though rare, did exist. For example, Hadrian, a North African abbot in 7th century Canterbury. And DNA from burials around 650 CE reveal West African ancestry in some individuals. Specific to 1066, records are sparse, but presence is plausible via trade or migration." To which the questioner replied, "Complete rubbish. 0 blacks in Britain during that historical period. 0!
Shush, Ellen.
No, someone else asked Grok whether the role of women had been over-elaborated in the show to make it woke, not having got the response they wanted, because actually Matilda of Flanders is famously the power broker of the time. She's the offspring of 2 royal families, married to illegitimate William. She rules Normandy, and when crowned Queen of England, had phrases inserted in the ceremony to the effect that she was divinely placed there by God, shared in royal power, and blessed her people by her strength. So then he asked again for, and I quote, "a review of King and Conqueror from the standpoint of someone who hates female empowerment." To which he got the answer he wanted, that the female characters are frustratingly prominent and steal focus from William's conquest, which feels like modern pandering, not historical accuracy. But in reposting it, he repeated the "Hey Grok" phrasing. So Grok replied to its own review, going, "That's an imaginative take." In reality, I'd say King and Conqueror captures the 1066 drama with strong performances. Female roles reflect their historical agency.
Oh, God, I know where this is going.
Depth without overshadowing the narrative. But funniest of all has to be this Reddit comment. And I quote, "Black need to focus for once on fixing their continent. They have to appropriate white culture because their culture was honestly never provided much. But they were not at the Battle of Hastings, and they were not samurai."
Oh my God! Sorry, Norman samurai, is that where they were going with this?
I don't know. Well, the idea that samurai are white culture. I just love that.
Did they spell samurai correctly?
Yeah, I think it's about, because there's a big anti-woke debate at the moment on the new Assassin's Creed.
Yes.
Shadows.
Are you on it?
Some of the voices by Andreou. Because the main character is black.
Right.
It's set in Imperial Japan. There's just so much in there.
Brilliant.
So yes, this week, I don't know, casting is woke, Grok is woke.
Reddit.
Japanese samurai are woke. Because it's our culture, man. So take it away. So there you go.
Well, thank you, Alex. That has made everybody in the studio laugh. I hope listeners have laughed too. Keep it coming. Any instances of woke you find, send them to quietriotpod@gmail.com.
Quiet Riot. We understand how lucky we are. Every day we're lucky. My children understand that too. But people like Johnny have worked their guts out.
But he was privileged from the start. I think Johnny...
What's wrong with that?
No, I'm not saying anything's wrong with it, but what I'm saying is we need to acknowledge that some people are born into privilege and some aren't. I would love to see that gap.
And how do you achieve that?
I think you invest more in state schools.
So private schooling is an issue for you?
Yeah.
But that's life.
Yes, no,
it's unfair. It is unfair, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
but life is unfair.
Yeah, no, I accept that.
If you've got it in you, it's in your genes. Why does everybody have to dumb down?
If you can access the bank of mum and dad, it can change everything. In 2023, more than £8 billion was passed from parents to children to help move their lives forward here in the UK. Not everyone is so fortunate, and the gap is widening. Cue brainchild of Andrew Lewin MP, the Citizens Advance, which would give anyone who has been working for 10 years the choice to unlock 1 year of their state pension early as a lump sum. In 2025, the full state pension is £11,973. So if you start work at 18, you'd be eligible at 28. If you leave education at 22, you'd be eligible at 32, so long as you've got a decade of national insurance contributions behind you. It could help you start a family, renovate your home, or even retrain. The choice would be entirely yours to spend as you wish. You could even, and we are not endorsing this, blow the lot on scratch cards. So, developed in collaboration with the Social Market Foundation, it is worth stressing that this is not free money. The choice would be to delay your state retirement age for a year and in exchange receive the lump sum. So for most people, that would mean putting the age at which you can claim your state pension back from 68 to 69. Andrew, what drove you to want to do something?
Well, first of all, thank you for the great summary, with the exception of the scratch cards piece, that you covered it really,
yes,
really
Andrew,
well.
why do you want people to have thousands of pounds for scratch cards?
Look, I'm going to answer this seriously because this is hugely important to me. I got into politics because I wanted to extend opportunity for all. And in the constituency I represent, Welwyn Hatfield in Hertfordshire, people who don't know our town or even our county that well might have an understandable assumption that in Hertfordshire, everyone's really wealthy and there's lots of affluence. And that is true in part, but absolutely not for all the constituency. In the place I represent, the gap in healthy life expectancy from the richest and the poorest ward within about 3 miles of each other is 12 years. So I set the...
Wow.
So clearly, we still live in a very unequal society. And I've been thinking about some of these policy ideas for some time, but now I'm a member of parliament, I've hopefully got the opportunity to push some of these forward. And there was a previous suggestion by the Resolution Foundation, actually, that when you turned 30, everybody should be given a lump sum of £10,000. You know, the starting point was similar to where I am, because if you do have access to the bank of mum and dad, it is completely transformative for your life experience in a way that people who can't rely on that money will almost never catch up. My view on that proposal, though, was that it was a little bit too simplified. And I think it's really important that you have this criteria, this qualifying criteria of 10 years in work, because if we get to a stage, and I hope we do, where we're having a serious discussion about this in the Labour Party, either in this term or as a manifesto commitment next time around, you've got to make the political argument that says this is not just free money for somebody who happens to have turned 30. If you've worked for 10 years, you have a choice.
And presumably it doesn't have to be 10 continuous years. So it can be the age of 34 if you worked 6 years and then did something, went back to do a master's and then worked another 4 or something.
Exactly. Look, I think it's got the potential to be something that makes a real difference, particularly to younger people at a point in their life when they most need access to capital. Because the difference between somebody who's 32 years old and is able to benefit from, gift from their parents and their ability to get on the housing ladder, and somebody who might have £500 from their parents is huge. There's a book that I read by a lady called Eliza Philby called Inheritocracy, which I'd really recommend.
We should put it on our bookshop.
Yeah, good.
Fantastic. It sounds like sort of political academic book. It's not at all. It's talking from her experience about how in her 30s she started to notice lots of her friends were able to get on the housing ladder or take extended time off when they started a family, and she almost couldn't work out why. And then she realised she was moving in circles where it was the norm that people were in receipt of these huge sums of money.
I got a research team working with me, and we modelled what the impact really is if you have the bank of mum and dad early on. Because as wealth accumulates, the advantage just builds. So if you get that gift in your mid-20s to get on the property ladder, compare that to your mate who gets nothing and is continuing to rent, particularly in London, the advantage just grows and grows and grows and grows and grows. So there is a point where it's not just whether you have the bank of mum and dad, it's also the age at which you get some kind of financial gift or financial leg up.
The last thing I'd say on it is we often debate inheritance tax, and it is an unpopular tax. And I wanted to approach this argument from a different perspective. Instead of having that debate about should we take more from inheritance to the state, because if you did increase inheritance tax, it would just go into the state's coffers. This is about giving individuals agency over something which is ultimately going to be their money anyway. That's why it's called a citizen's advance. It's an advance payment on your state pension, which will be due to you in the future anyway.
So we're only a couple of months away from a budget, from an autumn statement, and government are pretty timid to anything that costs money right now, given the state of the country's finances. How much do you think this is going to cost the government?
Really important question. So ultimately, this is cost neutral because this is about taking money. So instead of getting your pension at 68, you get it at 69, so you get the lump sum and it's brought forward. That's really important. But the work with the Social Market Foundation is beginning in earnest now to look at what this would mean in in-year costs for government. And you have to be realistic about this. It's probably a policy that would have to be phased in over time, because if, on day one you said, right, everybody who's done 10 years of work is eligible and there will be significant demand, that probably wouldn't work. But I do think part of the attraction is to government that this is cost neutral. The other thing we are going to explore is, could you also pay it back?
I was going to say, what if you took it, used it to have an extended maternity leave or whatever, to have extra pay that maybe your employer wasn't covering. You go back to work, get a promotion, earn a bit more money and think, actually, I would quite like to retire at 68, not at 69. Could you pay it back?
Precisely that. We're having that conversation. We don't want it to be binary. And I think if we can get that right and we can get a model that works, that will increase the attractiveness to people, because I think it was quite common that people need that cash aged 30, 35, and then when they get to 45, 50, they're feeling more comfortable. They pay it back and they return to a state pension age of 68.
It's interesting you say it's cost neutral, because that's the most expensive it could be, is cost neutral. Because if people get that money and invest it, or it helps them buy property, it's a GDP boost, isn't it, potentially?
Absolutely. It's a stimulus to the economy as well, because it is giving money to people at an age where they are more likely to spend it.
Why aren't we doing this already?
Well, I hope when I'm next
sounds
on.
Really good, doesn't it?
And also, I think politically, you could end up with a generation of people saying, oh, it was the Labour government that gave me 11 grand, 12 grand when I...
Just like people are saying today, that I'm a product of the...
right to buy or...
Yeah, of the right to buy. And then you have a generation saying that, I'm a sure start.
Yeah, exactly.
Kid.
Yeah.
Those things do make a difference.
The other thing I briefly say is that we do have child trust funds that the last Labour government introduced and are maturing now. And I write a birthday card to every 18-year-old in my constituency, not just saying, hello, I'm your MP. I say, happy birthday, I'm your MP. Did you know you have a child trust fund? So there is a concept that's broadly similar that already exists, but those sums of money are much smaller. £500 is usually the average. So there is a principle that the last Labour government believed in about giving people a start in life, but it's something I want to extend and think we can be even more ambitious on.
I guess, though, people are going to say, look at what's happening with house prices. And the reality is, even people with decent salary can't save fast enough for a deposit. House prices might have levelled off, particularly in certain parts of the country, but interest rates are still extortionate, mortgages out of reach, deposits therefore ballooning compared to wages. All of the schemes that are in place, like lifetime ISAs and shared ownership, and are quite full of restrictions and postcode lotteries, and of course very limited housing stock. So is the criticism going to be that 11k is just not going to be enough for people to get on the housing ladder, pay for a master's degree or make a meaningful dent in nursery fees?
Look, of course, and I'm not sitting here saying this is a panacea. This has to link in with other policies that the government is bringing forward. I sit on the Housing and Local Government Select Committee. I've got a background in housing. We have to build more homes. We have to build more affordable and social homes. At the same time, I just think this could be part of the jigsaw that we put together that makes a real difference.
This episode is brought to you by Cadillac. Cadillac certified service technicians are factory trained to fit your vehicle with the tires specifically developed for it. And with our tire price match guarantee, you get the best fit for the best deal. Let us do the work. Available on select eligible tire brands at participating dealers only. Offer ends 12/31/2025. Terms apply. See dealer for complete details. Visit Cadillac.com/service to learn more.
Wealth inequality, housing shortages especially, they act as a huge disincentive to starting a family. And so they are actually connected to the UK's low birth rates, immigration, it's all sort of interconnected. But how difficult is it politically to convince people to enact policies that effectively will probably come to fruition and benefit some government other than you down the line. Do you see what I mean? There is a sort of built-in short-termism. How do you combat that?
It's a good challenge, and we have to be brave as politicians and make arguments for the long term.
Would you say that bravery characterizes today's politicians? Is that the first adjective you would grasp for?
We could be even more brave, but I'll give you one example. Rachel Reeves' fiscal rules are different to the ones that the Conservatives had, and that has enabled more borrowing for capital investment and to the tune of about £100 billion. Now, actually, we are not going to see too much of the immediate benefit of that in this Parliament. That's not a secret because capital projects take time, but it is important to do now because it gets the economy moving in of itself, and we will see the benefit. If she was an entirely short-termist politician, she might have said, well, that's not of interest to me. Only thing that matters is where we are in 5 years. So there is sometimes more long-termism than people appreciate. But as we were saying earlier, it's not always sexy.
Because I think you need...
If it helps,
you need to give this thing a name. And it's got to be like the Lewin handout or the Labour boost or something.
Like the citizens' advance, though.
No. Because do you remember they called them Boris bikes?
Oh,
and it was Ken Livingstone. And that's the point that you're making. It's that someone else getting credit.
As I was saying that, the thing that popped in my mind was the fucking Boris bike.
Right. So, Andrew, you've got to trademark this thing.
Well, I guess you could go with the Lewin loan, but you know. I feel far too self-important, so somebody else is going to have to come up with that.
I'm going for the Andy Handy
So, call to action, Andrew. You've got a website. What is it? How can people find out more?
Dedicated website, citizensadvance.uk. If you Google it, sometimes might come up with Citizens Advice, so make sure you spell it right. But seriously, it's up, and I want to hear from people because this is a new concept. I'm really pleased and grateful that we've had the opportunity to talk about it today. There is a lot of work to do. The policy work with the SMF is ongoing. I want to hear reactions from people, builds on the idea, and make this something that potentially could be a really exciting and transformative policy.
Now, Naomi, we rely on you each week to close the show with some joy. Like a well-fitting bra, you lift, bring together, and add bounce. It's time for you to give us this week's grin and share it.
Good news is welcome to me. Bad news is hell come to me. Good news. Do-de-o-do-lo, 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 I want good news.
Well, hello, boys. Here comes the girl. And not just any girl, but a Time magazine girl of the year.
Ooh.
Now, as Kenny knows chief among us,
where are we going with this?
Scottish winters can be harsh.
You should say our bloody summers.
With temperatures dropping well below freezing on many nights. And for people sleeping rough, those conditions can be lethal. Enter one Rebecca Young, a Scottish schoolgirl, just 11 years old at the time, who was asked in class to come up with an idea to help people. I do not know what I would have suggested at 11. I think probably something like longer lunch breaks or innovative ideas to get out of PE.
Or I should play Dorothy.
Don't go there.
In The Wizard of Oz.
I'm not. Look, don't trigger me without warning. Don't trigger me without warning.
Go on.
But not Rebecca. She designed a solar-powered backpack with a built-in heated blanket for people experiencing homelessness. And it was not just a doodle on the back of her jotter. Rebecca actually researched solar panels, wiring, batteries, and produced a full-on engineering blueprint. And out of 70,000 entrants to a national competition, won an award. Not only that, but engineering firm Thales, who sponsored the competition, were so blown away by her design. They made 30 of them, and they're going to distribute those and have plans for another 120 through a Glasgow homeless shelter now. And I think this is incredible. Like, she is already solving problems that entire local authorities struggle with. And the best bit, she is only 12, right? So at this rate, by 18, she's going to have cracked teleportation and cured hay fever. So total hats off to Rebecca. Proof that sometimes the brightest solutions to the darkest problems come from the youngest of minds.
And that is a genuinely uplifting story. Thank you for that. And on that gloriously positive note, to which we will, of course, drop a link in the show notes, this EU citizen can bring our midweek show to a close. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a blast having you here.
Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you, guys.
And everyone at home, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget our next editorial meeting and Ask Us Anything Zooms are coming up soon. So make sure you are backing us at ko-fi/Quiet Riot Pod to get those invites straight to your inbox.
And we'll be back on Sunday with our brand new pencil case, our school bag, and our lunchbox ready for the parliamentary term to begin. Brackets, I know you're already back at school in Scotland. Don't at me, OK? Until then, check your blazer and plimsoll still fit. And do enjoy what's left of August.
We love you more than cheese and crackers. Bye.
Bye. Kenny hates cheese.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Soundstone Global.
You're feeling the pressure. You feel the pressure to be nice.
Yeah,
that's the
be
hardest
nice,
part.
Andrew. Be normal.
I like being normal. I think I'm quite good at being normal,
You
but
are,
we'll see.
you are. You're very good at
Past, Present, Future is the History of Ideas podcast with me, David Runtsman. Twice a week, we explore the history of good ideas, dangerous ideas, revolutionary ideas, and recently, the history of bad ideas. From meritocracy to genius, from austerity to identity, why do good people believe in things that do so much harm? Past, Present, Future, the History of Ideas podcast.